All right, welcome to this tactical explainer. Today, we're zeroing in on a seriously fascinating preseason clash set for August 1st, 2026. We're talking Eintracht Frankfurt taking on Waldhof Mannheim. Now, as summer preparations really start hitting their stride, this matchup at the Karl Benz Stadium gives us a brilliant window into how a top-tier tactical blueprint actually operates against resilient lower division opposition, especially in a genuinely hostile environment. We're going to break down the shapes, the pressing triggers, the underlying numbers, and exactly what you need to be watching for the second that whistle blows. So let's just dive right into this, because right off the bat, we've got a central tactical mystery and honestly a pretty fun quirk to this fixture. Contractually, and in our analytical models, Eintracht Frankfurt is actually designated as the home team. But in reality, this game is part of Waldhof Mannheim's season opening event. They're physically hosting this on their own turf at the Karl Benz Stadium. So here's the big question we need to solve. Can a third-tier side actually leverage their genuine home advantage and that structural resilience to withstand a top-flight, high-pressing machine? It's going to be interesting.
To really grasp the scale of this clash, we've got to look at the comparative gap here. Eintracht Frankfurt comes into this having finished 8th in the Bundesliga last season. They posted an 11-11-12 record, bagging 61 goals but conceding 65. I mean, they are a battle-tested top-flight squad. Waldhof Mannheim, on the flip side, finished 10th in the Liga. They won 15, drew 7, and lost 16, scoring 59 but leaking 72 goals across their 38 league matches. On paper, that is a stark two-division gap. But as we just mentioned, Waldhof's actual venue advantage makes this a way more compelling test than those raw league tables might suggest.
All right, moving on to Section 1, Tactical Blueprints and Formations. What's really fascinating here is the contrast in our certainty heading into the game. Eintracht Frankfurt, under Adi Hütter, comes in with a verified, documented structure, and that's based on their recent 3-0 friendly victory over Trabzonspor. They use this really aggressive 4-2-2-2 that pushes a super high line. For Waldhof, though, their exact current formation is basically unverified for this preseason fixture. But look, given the huge disparity in division and Frankfurt's aggressive rest defense, tactical logic tells us Waldhof is probably going to have to rely on a direct counterattacking threat. They'll be looking for those rapid releases the absolute second they bypass Frankfurt's initial press. Let's zoom in on Frankfurt's blueprint for a second. Adi Hütter deployed this incredibly compact 4-2-2-2 in both halves against Trabzonspor. Structurally, you're looking at a double pivot at the base of midfield, supported by 2 extremely narrow attacking midfielders and 2 central forwards right up top. What this does is literally flood the center of the pitch with bodies. It creates immediate numerical superiority for quick combinations right through the middle. And crucially, it allows for a ferocious, immediate counterpress the second they lose the ball. That is an absolute nightmare for an unorganized defense. Plus, those 2 forwards are specifically tasked with occupying both opposition center backs, pinning them deep and completely stopping them from stepping out to disrupt the midfield. But hey, we absolutely cannot dismiss the hosts here, and their recent record shows exactly why. Waldhof is absolutely no pushover at home, making this a classic David versus Goliath setup. Just look at their home split from the 2025-2026 season at the Karl Benz Stadion. 10 wins, 4 draws, and just 5 losses. In those 19 matches, they scored 33 goals and only conceded 30. When they're playing on their own turf, they show this genuine, stubborn resistance. They're organized, they've got the crowd behind them, and they know the dimensions of this pitch like the back of their hand. Frankfurt is stepping into a true footballing fortress, preseason or not. Okay, let's jump to Section 2, Pressing, Territory, and Key Matchups. So, the crucial point is how these 3 specific duels are going to play out over the 90 minutes. First up, Frankfurt's narrow 4-2-2-2 occupation between the lines going up against Waldhof's central defensive coverage. Because Frankfurt plays so incredibly narrow, Waldhof is going to have to compress their own midfield just to avoid being completely overrun centrally. Second, you've got the battle of the high line versus direct balls. Frankfurt's official match reports note their backline is commonly positioned right up near the halfway line to compress the pitch. That leaves a massive amount of space behind the last line. So if Waldhof can just survive that initial press, one accurate long ball over the top could be absolutely lethal. And third, set plays and second balls. Frankfurt successfully scored from a really well-worked short corner sequence against Trabzonspor, proving they're actively refining those routines. Meanwhile, Waldhof's home record proves they will fight tooth and nail for every single second ball. You can bet this won't be some passive, friendly atmosphere inside the penalty area.
All right, Section 3, Analytics, Expected Goals and Probabilities.
Now, it's really important to establish up front that because this is a preseason friendly, these are conservative model estimates. They reflected competitive gap and historical data rather than real-time event tracking. With that in mind, our model estimates Eintracht Frankfurt's expected goals at 2.35 for this fixture. This strong attacking projection is heavily driven by their Bundesliga pedigree. I mean, remember, they scored 61 goals in a top 5 European league last season. It's also backed up by their blistering start to the preseason, which includes a verified 7-1 demolition of FC Gießen and that convincing 3-0 win over Trabzonspor. They are creating high-quality chances in volume, and honestly, the model expects that attacking output to translate right over to the Karl Benz Stadium. Conversely, Waldhof's expected goals estimate sits at just 0.80. Even though they're at home, the model has to factor in their broader defensive vulnerabilities. They leaked 72 goals across their 38 third-tier matches last season. Because of that underlying defensive fragility, even against lower-tier opposition, the model calculates that sustained territorial pressure from a Bundesliga side like Frankfurt is highly, highly plausible. Waldhof is basically going to have to rely on low-probability, high-efficiency counterattacks if they want to outperform this 0.80 expectation. And this brilliantly illustrates the overwhelming match probabilities we're looking at. The model heavily favors the top-tier side, giving Eintracht Frankfurt a whopping 72% chance of victory over the 90 minutes. The draw sits at 17%, and a Waldhof Mannheim outright win is modeled at just 11%. So even when you factor in the physical venue advantage for the 3 Liga side, the squad-level evidence and that 2-division gap just make Frankfurt the overwhelming favorites on paper. Moving into Section 4, live cues and game scenarios. Look, we all know football isn't played on a spreadsheet, so here are 4 chronological game states you should be watching for as the match unfolds. Number 1, the first 30 minutes. Expect to see Waldhof's build-up heavily compressed. Frankfurt is absolutely going to look to initiate early regains and suffocate the hosts from the very first whistle. Number 2, what happens if Frankfurt scores first? Well, if that happens, Waldhof has to expand their shape to chase the game, and that will inevitably open up the exact central spaces Frankfurt's narrow 4-2-2-2 is literally designed to exploit. Number 3, what if Waldhof scores first? If they pull this off, it likely comes from successfully testing that high line with a rapid direct ball. If they take an unexpected lead, expect them to sink right into a deep, resilient low block, basically daring Frankfurt to break down a fortified penalty area. And finally, the 60-minute mark. If we're sitting at 0-0 here, the whole dynamic shifts. Preseason rotation takes over. We're going to see sweeping substitutions, which, usually disrupts pressing coordination. The game will likely get stretched, a bit chaotic, and heavily dependent on the depth of the respective benches. Finally, Section 5, the final verdict. So, based on all the grounded tactical evidence we've covered, Eintracht Frankfurt are the clear favorites. The squad-level evidence and their really encouraging preseason form both point to a comfortable result. The model's central estimate projects a multiple-goal victory for the Bundesliga side, with 2-0 or 3-1 standing as the most representative scorelines. Sustained territorial pressure and clinical finishing from those central overloads, that's what's expected to be the deciding factor today. However, as with any rigorous analysis, we do have a mandatory sports analytics disclaimer to cover. We are dealing with preseason-friendly conditions here. There are no verified public expected goals datasets available for this specific fixture, nor do we have confirmed starting lineups. And actually, no match-specific injury reports were available during our research either. So the extensive friendly rotation we expect to see, combined with Waldhof's actual physical venue advantage at the Karl Benz Stadion, means this forecast is just inherently less certain than a standard mid-season competitive fixture. So what does this all mean? It really comes down to one final question. Will Eintracht Frankfurt's relentless, high-pressing 4-2-2-2 structure completely dominate the territory and the scoreboard? Or will the notoriously stubborn Karl Benz Stadium witness a massive preseason shock? The tactical blueprints have drawn, the models have spoken, and now all that's left is for the players to take the pitch on August 1st. Keep your eyes glued to that high defensive line and those central midfield battles. It's going to be an absolutely fascinating watch. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and enjoy the match.